My boyfriend started an Instagram live with a smile on his face and a screwdriver in his hand. Then he looked straight into the camera and said, "Watch me break up with her and kick her out of my apartment." That was the moment I understood something terrifying. Some people do not destroy your life in private. Some people need an audience. My name is Elena Whitmore. I was 29 years old when I learned that humiliation can be staged like entertainment, betrayal can wear designer cologne and a charming grin, and the most dangerous man in the room is often the one performing calm for strangers. The strange part is, I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I did not beg him to stop. I just stood there in the doorway of my bedroom, one hand still resting on the frame, and watched the man I had loved for 2 years smile at his viewers as if my life were content. It was a Tuesday. Not dramatic on the surface, no thunder outside, no broken glass, no ominous soundtrack, just late afternoon light falling across the living room in long gold bars, my laptop still open on my desk behind me, and my boyfriend, Damian Cross, angling his phone for better lighting, like this was some polished little moment he had rehearsed in his head. We had been living together for 8 months. At least that was the phrase everyone used, living together. It sounded equal, domestic, safe. It made it sound like we had built something side by side. But the truth was simpler than that, and much uglier. The apartment was mine. I had signed the lease 3 years before I ever met Damien. It was a one-bedroom in a building that wasn't luxurious, but it was solid. Clean lobby, decent security, a front desk that actually knew residents by name, and a doorman named Luis, who had the kind of memory that made you feel looked after. He knew who took oat milk in their coffee, who worked night shifts, who always forgot their umbrella. He had once handed me back my own scarf before I realized I had left it downstairs. That apartment had been my first real adult victory. Mine after bad roommates, unstable sublets, and years of pretending I was less stressed than I was. And now Damien was standing in that apartment in a fitted black t-shirt I had bought him 2 months earlier, telling several hundred strangers that he was about to throw me out of it. "Guys," he said to the screen in a voice so sweet it made my skin crawl, "I've been patient for way too long. I've tried to be nice. I've tried to make this work. But some women only understand consequences." The comments were moving fast. Heart emojis, fire emojis, laughing faces. A few people typed things like, "Do it, king behavior, put her out." I remember staring at the phone propped on the bookshelf and feeling a coldness spread through me so fast it was almost calming. Damien saw me then. His grin widened. "There she is," he said to the viewers, turning a little so I was fully in frame. "Everybody say hi to my soon-to-be ex." For a second, neither of us moved. He wanted a reaction. I knew that instantly. He wanted outrage, tears, maybe even something messy enough to clip and repost later. He wanted proof that he had power. Instead, I said, "What are you doing?" It came out quieter than I expected, almost curious. He laughed, and the sound made something inside me go still. "I'm ending this," he said, "publicly, since apparently private conversations don't work with you." That was a lie. We had not had some long series of mature, private conversations. We had arguments, yes. We had tension. We had those strange little silences that had started creeping into our relationship months ago. But this was not the final step in a painful process. This was theater. This was vanity with the ring light. Damien reached into a shopping bag by the couch and pulled out a boxed doorknob set. He held it up for the live stream like a prize. The comments exploded. "No," I said, finally stepping forward. "You're not serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." His tone turned mocking. "You've got 30 minutes to pack a bag and figure yourself out." Then he crouched by the front door and set the new lock hardware on the floorboards. I can still remember how absurdly normal some details looked. The loose sleeve of his shirt sliding up his forearm, the little metal glint of the screwdriver, the half-drunk sparkling water on the coffee table, the plant by the window that I kept forgetting to rotate toward the sun. Ordinary things surrounding a completely insane moment. He started unscrewing the doorknob while narrating the scene to his followers. "Look at this," he said brightly. "I'm literally changing the locks right now." She thought she could keep disrespecting me in my own place. My own place. Not even then did he hesitate. Not even then did he seem afraid that facts might matter. That should have shocked me more than it did. But by then, some part of me had already been preparing for this without fully admitting it. Not for the live stream specifically. Not for the screwdriver and the audience and the smug little performance. But for a public lie big enough that he would eventually believe it himself. For months, Damien had been speaking about my apartment like it belonged to him. My kitchen, my view, my place. I had seen it in captions, heard it in passing comments to friends, noticed it in the lazy entitlement of the way he spoke. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Couples did that, didn't they? Language blurred, space merged, possessions softened. But somewhere along the way, his tone changed. The apartment stopped being a place where he stayed. It became a stage where he played owner. And now here he was, trying to turn fiction into law with a live audience and a screwdriver. I pulled out my phone. Damien glanced over his shoulder. Calling someone to come get you? No, I said. I dialed building security. Luis answered on the second ring. Front desk. It's Elena in 14B, I said. My voice was steady enough to surprise even me. I need you upstairs right now. Damien is trying to change the locks. There was a beat of silence. Then Luis said, immediately serious, on my way. No questions. No confusion. Just that. Damien had gone quiet while I made the call. Not worried exactly. More annoyed. He straightened up from the door, screwdriver still in hand. You called security? He asked, almost amused. Yes. He let out a breathless laugh and looked at the phone camera. See what I mean? Drama. This is what I've dealt with. I leaned against the wall and folded my arms. Keep streaming, I said. That made him frown. He did not like my tone. He did not like the fact that I still was not begging. He did not like that something in my face had changed. Excuse me? He said. You wanted an audience, I told him. Keep streaming. Something flickered in his expression then. Not fear yet, just confusion. A hairline crack in the performance. He looked back at the comments as if they might rescue him. Then there was a knock at the door. 3 quick, firm strikes. I walked over and opened it. Luis stood there with another security staff member, Tom, both of them wearing the kind of neutral expression people wear when they already know this is going to end badly for someone. Luis looked past me and took in the scene in one sweep. The phone on the shelf, the open lock kit, Damien standing near the door like a man halfway through his own public execution. What seems to be the problem? Luis asked. Damien got there first. She's being dramatic, he said, flashing a smile that used to work on people. We're breaking up. I'm just asking her to leave. Luis did not even glance at him. He looked at me. I nodded once toward the door hardware on the floor. Luis turned then, slow and deliberate, and his voice became formal. Sir, he said, your name is not on the lease for this apartment. The room changed. It is hard to explain that moment unless you have watched arrogance lose oxygen in real time. The live stream was still going. I could see the comments accelerate, confusion replacing applause. Wait, what? It's her apartment? He's not on the lease? This is insane. Damien blinked. That's not... We live here together. Tom stepped forward. That does not make you the leaseholder. Damien's face lost color so fast it was almost violent. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time since this started, I saw that he understood. The trap was not that I had called security. The trap was that I had let him keep talking long enough for everyone to hear the truth when it arrived. And the live was still running. Sir, Luis repeated, I'm going to need you to step away from the door. Damien's jaw tightened. We live here together, he insisted. Luis nodded slowly, but his tone didn't change. That may be, but only one person is legally registered as the leaseholder. He turned slightly and looked at me, Elena Whitmore. Damien stared at me like he had just discovered a new language. The arrogance on his face began to dissolve piece by piece. What did you tell them? He said quietly. Nothing, I replied, because the truth was I hadn't needed to. That apartment had been mine long before Damien Cross walked into my life. 3 years before him. 3 years of working late, saving money, and building something that finally felt stable. When I signed that lease, I remember standing in the empty living room with the keys in my hand and thinking, I finally did it. No roommates. No temporary sublets. No shared leases with strangers who disappeared in the middle of the night. Just my own place. A small but bright 1-bedroom on the 14th floor with windows that looked out over the river. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. And Damien had known that from the very beginning. I met Damien 2 years ago at a startup networking event. One of those loud cocktail mixers where everyone is holding a drink they don't want and pretending to care about someone else's business idea. I almost didn't go that night. Work had been exhausting. My social battery was non-existent, and I had spent the whole afternoon convincing myself that staying home with takeout and a movie would be perfectly respectable adult behavior. But a friend dragged me along. That's where I saw him. Damien had a way of walking into a room like he belonged in every corner of it. Tall, confident, effortlessly charming. The kind of man who spoke easily with strangers and somehow made each person feel like they were the most interesting conversation he'd had all evening. He introduced himself with a smile that felt disarming. Damien Cross, Elena Whitmore. We talked for almost 40 minutes. At the time, it felt natural. Now, looking back, I realize he did most of the steering, asking questions that made me talk about my work, my apartment, my life in the city. He laughed easily, complimented my ambition, and told me I was refreshingly grounded. I remember feeling flattered. Looking back now, I wonder if he was already calculating. We started dating a week later. The first 6 months were good. Really good. Damien was attentive in a way that made you feel chosen. He showed up with coffee when I worked late. He texted good morning messages that somehow always arrived exactly when I needed them. He made me laugh. He made me feel like I had finally found someone who understood the strange balance between ambition and stability. If there were warning signs then, they were small enough to ignore. He talked about money a lot. Not complaining, exactly. Just always discussing what he deserved, what he should have, what other people were getting. But when you're falling for someone, you smooth out the edges of those things. You call them personality quirks. 8 months into the relationship, Damien started staying at my apartment more often. First it was weekends, then a few nights during the week. Then suddenly most of his clothes were in my closet. He framed it like a natural progression. "We basically live together anyway," he said one night while cooking pasta in my kitchen. I remember hesitating, not because I didn't love him, but because that apartment meant something to me. It was the first place that had ever been fully mine. Still, I convinced myself that relationships required compromise. So Damien moved in, but one thing never changed. I never added his name to the lease. He had suggested it once. I remember the conversation clearly. We were sitting on the couch and he said casually, "You should probably add me to the paperwork." "Why?" I asked. "Just makes things official." I shrugged. "It's not necessary." He didn't push it too hard that night. At the time, I thought he simply didn't care about paperwork. Later, I would realize something else. Damien liked appearances more than reality, and appearances were easier to control online. The problems started small. At least that's how they felt at the time. He started going out more often. Networking up, he called it. Late dinners with clients. Drinks with colleagues. Sometimes he came home at 2 in the morning. Sometimes 4. Once I noticed the faint scent of perfume on his jacket. Not mine. When I asked about it, he laughed. "You're imagining things." Then his phone started behaving strangely. Always face down. Passwords changing frequently. If I walked into a room while he was texting, the screen went black instantly. "You're paranoid," he told me once when I asked why. People deserve privacy. I remember apologizing that night. Apologizing for asking? That's the thing about being slowly gaslit. You start assuming the problem is your perception, not their behavior. Then there were the credit card charges. That was the moment something inside me really began to shift. 8 months ago, I had added Damien as an authorized user on one of my credit cards. It seemed practical. Shared groceries, occasional dinners, the normal things couples split. At first, the charges were ordinary. Then they weren't. Restaurants I had never heard of. Luxury hotel bars. 2 separate hotel bookings in the same city we already lived in. When I confronted him, Damien didn't get angry. He got wounded. "You don't trust me?" "It just seems strange," I said carefully. "They're work meetings," he replied immediately. "You want me to succeed, right?" Of course I did. So I apologized again. Looking back now, I realized something painful. Damien never actually had to convince me of anything. He only had to make me doubt myself. 3 months before the livestream incident, everything changed. Because that was the moment I stopped apologizing and started paying attention. 3 months before Damien tried to throw me out of my own apartment on Instagram Live, I hired a private investigator. I'm not proud of that decision. But I was also no longer sleeping properly, and something inside my life had begun to feel staged. Conversations that didn't line up. Stories that shifted slightly every time I asked the same question twice. Late nights that somehow always came with vague explanations and a defensive smile. Gaslighting does something strange to your instincts. It makes you distrust your own memory, your own logic, your own eyes. And at some point, you start wondering whether the only way to prove reality is to document it. So I did. The investigator's name was Marla Chen, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and the kind of calm professionalism that made you feel like nothing in the world surprised her anymore. When I explained this situation over coffee, she didn't judge me. She just listened. Then she asked a few questions about Damien's schedule, his habits, where he said he worked late, where he said he met clients. At the end of the meeting, she slid a business card across the table. "If there's something there," she said, "we'll find it." She was right. It took 3 days. 3 days before my phone buzzed with a message that made my stomach drop. Photos attached. I opened them sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where Damien and I had eaten dinner together the night before. The first photo showed him sitting at a hotel bar. He looked relaxed, laughing. Across from him sat a woman with long dark hair and a fitted red coat. She was leaning toward him the way people lean when they think the moment belongs to them. The next photo shows them leaving the hotel together. The third showed them kissing beside a black sedan parked outside a restaurant. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was clarity. Because suddenly every strange moment of the past 6 months had snapped into place like pieces of a puzzle. The late nights, the hotel charges, the defensive tone whenever I asked questions. Her name, I would later learn, was Sabrina Blake. From what Marla uncovered, Damien had been seeing her for 5 months. 5, not 3, not recently. 5 months of parallel relationships. 2 separate lives, 2 separate realities. When I received the report, I didn't confront Damien. That surprises people when I tell them the story now. Most assume I exploded immediately, threw his belongings out the window, demanded answers. But the truth was quieter than that. I needed time. Not because I doubted the evidence, because I suddenly realized something more disturbing than the cheating. Damien had begun rewriting the story of our life, not just privately, publicly. And I discovered that completely by accident. 2 weeks after hiring the investigator, I was scrolling through Instagram during lunch when I noticed a photo Damien had posted. It was a picture of our living room, the same living room I had spent months decorating. The caption read, "Finally relaxing in my place after a long week." My place. At first I assumed it was careless wording. Couples say things like that. But then I looked at the comments. "Bro, your apartment is sick. That view is insane. Man, you're living well." Damien never corrected them. He liked the comments, encouraged them, let the lie grow quietly. That was when something inside me shifted. Because cheating hurts. But the arrogance of rewriting someone else's life? That felt colder. Over the next few weeks, I began noticing how often he did it. Photos from my kitchen, my balcony, my living room. Each time framed the same way. My apartment, my space, my view. And people believed him. The version of reality he presented online slowly became the one everyone accepted, including Sabrina. According to Marla's report, Damien had told her the same story. That he lived alone. That the apartment was his. That he worked as a consultant from home. And that he occasionally needed help covering temporary financial setbacks. Sabrina had sent him money. Small amounts at first. $500. Then $800. Then $1,500. All supposedly to help him maintain the apartment. My apartment. That was when the confusion disappeared. Damien wasn't just cheating. He was building a fantasy life using other people's stability. Mine. And Sabrina's. The strange thing about realizing someone has been lying to you is that anger doesn't arrive first. Observation does. You start watching them more carefully, listening differently, seeing small performances for what they are. The night before the live stream incident, Damien came home late again. He smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his. He dropped his keys on the counter and kissed my cheek casually. "Long day?" he asked. "Not really." He poured himself a drink and leaned against the kitchen island. "Thinking about making some changes soon," he said. "What kind of changes?" He smiled. "The kind where I start taking control of things." At the time, I assumed he meant work. Or money. Or one of the vague career ambitions he talked about constantly. Now I realized something unsettling. Damien had already decided what he was going to do. He had just been waiting for the right moment to perform it. The live stream. The screwdriver. The speech about kicking me out of his apartment. That wasn't spontaneous. It was a plan. But he made one critical mistake. He believed the lie he had been telling everyone else. And when people believe their own stories long enough, they stop checking whether reality agrees. Which is why, on that Tuesday afternoon, when he started unscrewing the lock in front of hundreds of strangers online, I didn't panic. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself. Because by that point, I understood something Damien didn't. Truth doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it just needs the right moment to walk into the room. And that moment had just knocked on my door. 3 days after Damien was escorted out of my apartment, the internet had already decided what kind of man he was. The video spread faster than I expected. Someone uploaded the live stream recording to TikTok. Another account posted it on Twitter. Within hours, it appeared on Reddit threads dedicated to public meltdowns and relationship drama. By Thursday morning, the clip had been viewed more than 2 million times. 2 million strangers watching the exact moment Damien realized the apartment he claimed online wasn't his. 2 million people hearing Louise say calmly, "Sir, your name is not on the lease." I didn't watch the viral versions, but I knew they were everywhere because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, coworkers, people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this you? Elena, I think your ex just went viral." My responses were simple. Yes. No, I'm fine. Yes, it's exactly as ridiculous as it looks. But the internet did what the internet always does. It investigated. And the deeper people dug into Damien's online presence, the worse things looked. All those photos he had posted from my apartment were easy to compare with the video. Screenshots started circulating. His caption, "My living room." Next to footage of Luis explaining the lease belonged to me. Another caption, "Finally enjoying my balcony view." Next to the moment security escorted him out. The contrast was brutal. Someone even created a side-by-side collage that went viral. On the left, Damien posing confidently in my kitchen. On the right, Damien standing pale while security explained property law. The internet loves hypocrisy, and Damien had handed them a perfect example. Sabrina tried to do damage control. The night after the video spread, she posted an Instagram story claiming the situation had been misrepresented. She said she had been escaping a toxic relationship. The problem was simple. Hundreds of people had watched the live stream. Thousands more had seen the recording. If she had really been afraid, the internet asked, why was Damien the one being removed? Why had he been the person trying to change the locks? The story lasted 4 hours. Then it disappeared. And so did Sabrina. Her Instagram account went private, then vanished entirely. The next surprise came 2 days later. I was answering emails when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Hello? There was a pause. Then a man said carefully, "Is this Elena Whitmore?" "Yes. My name is Derek Sullivan." The name clicked immediately. Derek, the man in the photographs. The one Sabrina had been kissing outside the restaurant. "I think we should talk," he said. He sounded exhausted rather than defensive. "I had no idea you existed," he continued. "Sabrina told me she was single." Of course she had. "Did you see the video?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "That's how I found out." We talked for almost 20 minutes. The strange thing was how similar our stories sounded. Sabrina had been seeing Derek for 5 months. The same 5 months she had been seeing Damien. She told him she was struggling financially and needed help keeping her apartment. Over 2 months, Derek had sent her about $1,500. Money he believed was helping her stay afloat. When I explained the credit card charges Damien had made, Derek sighed. So she was running the same story on both of us. "Looks like it. I broke things off yesterday," he said. "Smart move." Before hanging up, he added quietly, "I feel like an idiot." "You're not the only one." 2 weeks later, Damien returned to the building. He wasn't alone. Luis called my phone from the lobby. "Your ex is here," he said. "With who?" "Older woman, probably his mother." That didn't surprise me. "She says he needs to collect the rest of his things." I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, "Let them up." But I added one instruction. "Stay nearby." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Damien stood in the hallway wearing a gray hoodie and sweatpants. He looked thinner. Beside him stood a woman who shared his sharp jawline. His mother. Her expression was furious. "You're Elena?" she asked immediately. "Yes. You had no right to throw my son out like that." I kept my voice calm. "He tried to change the locks while live streaming it." "That doesn't matter." "It does when the apartment isn't his." She looked ready to argue again, but Damien touched her arm. "Mom," he said quietly, "let's just get my things." It was the first time I had heard his voice without arrogance. He stepped inside. The boxes were waiting by the door. Clothes, shoes, toiletries, everything he had brought when he moved in. "You packed everything," he said. "Yes." Luis remained in the hallway. It took 3 trips to move the boxes to their car, 3 quiet elevator rides, 3 walks through a lobby where people clearly recognized him from the video. On the final trip, we stood alone beside the car. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Damien said quietly, "I'm sorry. For cheating, for lying, for the live stream." He looked down at the pavement. "I was trying to look like I had my life together," he said. "That I was successful. I thought if people believed it long enough, maybe it would become real." I watched him for a moment. "You could have just been honest," I said. "About everything." He nodded slowly. "I know." His mother honked the car horn impatiently. Damien placed the final box in the trunk. Then he got into the passenger seat. As the car pulled away, he looked up once at the building, at the 14th floor windows, at the life he had convinced himself was his, a life he never actually owned. A month passed. The internet eventually moved on to other scandals. Damien deleted his Instagram account 2 weeks after the incident. A mutual friend later told me he moved back to his parents' house in New Jersey. Apparently, he started working part-time at his father's insurance office. Back at my apartment, I changed the locks properly. Building management issued a notice that Damien was not allowed on the property without my permission. I removed him from my credit card, changed every password I owned, checked my credit report. That was when I discovered something else. Damien had tried to open a store credit account using my information. I filed a police report. The detective said they would follow up. The apartment felt different after that. Quieter. Lighter. I rearranged the furniture. Bought new artwork. Even brought home a plant I'm fairly sure I'll accidentally kill within a month. It didn't matter. The place felt like mine again. 3 months after the live stream incident, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, 3 pages long, from Damien. He apologized again, said he had started therapy, admitted he had been chasing the fantasy of looking successful while using my stability to support it. He also confessed something else. Sabrina hadn't been the only other woman. There had been others. He said he was ashamed, that he hoped someday I might forgive him. I read the letter twice. Then I threw it away, not out of anger, because I simply didn't need it anymore. Last week, the building installed new security cameras in the hallway. Luis joked it was because of that famous incident. I bought him a bottle of whiskey as a thank you. Every now and then, someone still recognizes me from the video. They usually smile and say something like, "You handled that guy perfectly." I always give the same response. I smile. Then I change the subject. Because the most important part of that story isn't the viral video. It's what happened after. The apartment is quiet again, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, it finally feels like home.